So, hi everybody, welcome to this session, and thank you for joining Lisa and I today on exploring leading successful change. And where we're going to focus our attention is on leading the people side of change. It's the who's changing versus the what's changing. Not saying that the what's changing is not important, but it's looking at a deeper dive into the people side of change. As I say, I'm Amanda Page. I'm Director of Change Tempo Limited. And I'm a leadership coach and a change mentor for any individual or leader who's looking to accelerate both at a personal level or at an organizational level. And having worked in Fortune 500 global organizations, I've led a number of change initiatives in areas such as acquisition integration, sales tools and processes, and customer loyalty. So I've seen firsthand in the workplace what change can do to people both positively and otherwise. So it's great to have you join us.
And today we're really excited about working together because we're going to be focusing on this next sort of half an hour about the strategies for leading change confidently. So it's about thinking about the impact of change on the people in your organization and how to lead that with confidence, because it's challenging to get it right if you're not thinking about the right things. I'm a psychologist and psychotherapist, and I set up It's Time for Change nearly 10 years ago, working with organisations and individuals to help people do things a little bit differently, focusing on their people. My motto is, if you get people right, we get business right. And so I work with individuals and organisations to think about how to do that, so we increase engagement and mental well-being and outcomes. And the real joy of working with Amanda is that it's the combination of art and science, if you like, in terms of what we both bring in terms of our expertise and our approach to something that is a bit of a leadership dance. I think you sometimes talk about, Amanda.
Yes. Michael will know this.
There's no textbook that says this is how to do it, and it's just about combining different approaches. So I'm just admitting different people as I talk, and talking and clicking buttons.
Oh, well done.
It's an interesting approach.
And you're a master at multitasking. We'll just add that. Yeah, so we're looking forward to having your questions, your comments, your wisdom, sharing your thoughts and ideas and your experiences. And we'll follow up, or Lisa will follow up with an email to you, which will include the recording, the deck, and a one-page document, which gives you a little bit more depth into the change cycle model that we're going to be covering a little bit later on. So, I love this image. And the question here is, have you ever wondered what employees might be thinking when the hands shake on a major change or transformation, and they're in the background, watching and wondering, what does this all mean for me?
And I think we need to equip the people in your organisation with the know-how, the skills, the confidence to be able to deal with change. And when people have the information that they need, there's a sense of certainty, increased certainty, even when the times are uncertain. So by equipping people with information and the skills and the confidence they need, you're less likely to get the defensive reaction that you can otherwise experience. And I think when we talk about, or we look at this handshake, people don't have the information they need and aren't equipped for the emotional side of change. They'll base their experience or their expectations of change on what they've experienced before. And so previous experiences of change that could be negative will impact on how they perceive the future to be. And I think that's something we have to be very aware of. So this handshake looks really, really positive, but for some people, they might be looking at that thinking, what does that really mean? And I love the example that Stephen Covey talks about with Warren Buffett when he did a big merger, and it was based on a handshake, and it was all in the press and so on, because it was like this, you know, they kind of bypassed normal due diligence and said, we're going to do this handshake, and it sped the whole process up. And I think we tend to overcomplicate change, and we tend to miss miss the really important emotional aspects. And if we get the trust right, then we can enable that whole process to move forward much more quickly. So I love this image. For me, it's really, really positive.
Yes.
And it just really underlies or underlines what we should be focusing on.
Yeah. I think it symbolises how much change happens in a vacuum until it goes live. And then everybody's expected to sort of just jump in and start doing it.
Yeah. So, oh, hang on, I've got someone else in the waiting room.
Lovely.
Welcome. This is another great image. And this starts to answer, we're looking at answering some of the questions that we been putting out on LinkedIn and so on about some of the questions we need to be asking ourselves and of our organizations. And this image is a great one in terms of representing, the complexity, the chaos of what's happened over the last 6 months and the 6 months that's to come. And I think when we're looking at the speed of change that we're going through at the moment, and we're thinking about not having clarity around where we're actually going, we need to take a step back and think, right now, what do we know? What do we know about where we're going, and how can we plan that? And how can we make sure that everyone else around us is also on the same page moving forward? And it's having those precise examples of or precise information around where you're going, what the future looks like, how you're getting there, what the journey is going to look like, what the journey is going to feel like. So knowing that actually it's going to feel bumpy at times. You're not expected to go through a change process and it all feels hunky-dory all the time. And being accepting of that and expecting that means that your organization is becoming agile, and you're becoming sort of an organization fit for the future, which we need to be able to accelerate through much more quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can ask something then, Amanda. We just nodded.
Nope, I was nodding.
And I think when we get this right, when we think about the people side of change, and when we get it right for them in terms of how they're feeling, the emotional ups and downs, it minimizes our work as a leader. Otherwise we end up having to rework things. When people are on edge and they're in a place where emotionally their arousal is really high, then they're uncertain, they're defensive, they're feeling angry and so on, more mistakes tend to happen and so on. So we as leaders need to make sure that we're minimizing how much we have to rework situations and put things right. So I think the communication is really important. I was chatting to a friend of mine on the weekend who's an anaesthetist in a hospital, and obviously you'd expect with a hospital it would be incredibly stressful with having to deal with patients and all the needs coming in around COVID. And he said that was actually the least stressful part of it. The most stressful part was not having the information. And he said even if the people at the top were saying we don't know what's happening regarding this particular thing this week, but we all know next week, or this week we're not certain, but this is going to be our approach. Next week we'll probably change it. Tomorrow we'll probably change it. But just knowing that you have all the information that your leaders have, my friend would have said would have made a massive difference. So I think it's, people don't like bad news, but actually people like certainty, some degree of certainty. They prefer to have bad news than no news at all. So I think that's something we have to be very, very mindful of. And Amy's just made a comment about you have to be fit for the future. And I think, and that's fit for the future was the name given to the last restructure in my organisation.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
Okay.
Hi, TC. Thank you. So, yeah, you mentioned change agile or change agility, Lisa, and it's a term that I often see used, and I guess I ask myself the question: how can we really define what a change agile organization or an individual or team that is really, really good at managing change, especially in that fast pace, that rapid change environment you were talking about in the NHS, where things are changing almost daily on a weekly basis. And so defining what it actually looks and feels like can be a real challenge. And I was reflecting over my experience of working with some great leaders and some great teams and individuals who are really, really good at managing change, really good at adapting and adopting really quickly. And there's three things in common that they all have. And that is that they're ready, they're willing, and they're able when change happens. And as we explore this, I'd like to encourage you to think about your organization or even yourself and ask, how would I rate myself or my organizations against being ready, willing, and able for change? Where is their strength? Where are their opportunities for growth? So again, please, great to see your comments and thoughts in chat as we go. So let's just look at each of these in a little bit more detail about the definition. So being ready to change means that in your organization, there's an expectation that change is just part of the culture. It's viewed as a positive way. So people might be saying things like, or your talent or employees or customers might be saying things like, you know, when change happens, it's great. It's about innovation. We can really see ourselves growing. Or you might hear people saying, oh my God, I love working for this company, but oh my God, the change is just relentless. So it's both relentless change, but the perception and the experience of it is very different. So ready organizations view change as innovation and growth. And like wolves, and this is why I like the analogy here, is that it thrives on that communication. It encourages and enables collaboration to happen, that transparency up front about the change, and leveraging each other's strengths and ensuring that there's clarity about roles and who does what. And that's what makes the hunt successful for a pack of wolves. They just have this intelligence that enables them to work so cleverly together. And then from a willing perspective, willing organizations or willing individuals means that they have a healthy relationship with change in general, and they have a good understanding of the complex environment within which they work. So they're highly curious about not just what's changing that's being passed down the organization, but they're curious about the individual's experience, the team's experience, and the organizational's experience as a system. And employees and leaders who are comfortable in this complexity are more able to connect those experiences together and see it as a whole. And that way they're able to ensure real alignment in the journey. So the communication lines are happening up and down and across the organization. In terms of ability or able to change, being able to change requires a real investment in building the right skills, the mindset and the attitudes for ongoing change, whether it's fast or slow. Sometimes no change can be as stressful as a lot of change very quickly. So it's about having the physical and emotional strength and the stamina required to be able to accelerate change at a moment's notice and change direction with ease and fluidity. So that's my view and my experience of what change agility looks like: ready, willing, and able.
And I think Sally's just made a really good comment in the chat box about, as leaders, we might be ready and, you know, ready, willing, and able for the change, and actually further ahead than our teams around us.
Yes.
And therefore we need to tread carefully. And I think that's real insight, which doesn't surprise me from Sally. She's a great leader. But that sense of having to be very mindful of actually where you're at and being very aware that everyone else in the room will be at different places. It's very, very unusual to have everyone in the room at exactly the same stage when you're thinking about the journey coming onto change. And I think which leads us really well onto this next image of an iceberg. And some of you might have seen this before, in the sense that when we look at the people around us in our teams, we just see what's on the surface. We just see what's above the water level. And that can be very misleading. I was chatting to, I was doing some training with a manager last week about his team. And he said, yeah, but they're all competent. And, you know, I don't need to do X, Y, and Z for them because they can get on and do it. And I know they're more than competent. I was chatting to the team who were feeling very, very anxious, but their manager wasn't seeing that. And it's that whole understanding that what we see and what we're expecting can actually be very, very different to what's underneath. And when you think about what might be underneath the iceberg, you think about what's going on in your workplace culture in terms of all the assumptions that are being made all the time. And we all make assumptions, and that's the way we have to operate in terms of being able to kind of get through day to day, but actually some of them are quite damaging. All those unwritten rules that you might not even be aware of. If you ask your team about them, what's really going on here, and they're like, well, surely we're supposed to do this, or we're not supposed to do this. It's like, well, where did that come from? Yeah. But finding all this out, the stories that people tell themselves, all the power and politics and so on. And then even further down, which often people don't get to see, is what's really going on for us, that sense of anger and resentment, the real high level of anxiety, and the fear that people are experiencing. And we often don't see this. Some leaders aren't aware that anything exists underneath the waterline, or they just don't know how to access it. And I think, when people are open to the fact that there is a whole, the majority of what's going on for a person is beneath the surface, and they acknowledge that, and you're in a situation where actually we need to be able to equip our managers to be able to access this and to be able to know how to support people and how to give people confidence, then that's when you're in that really wonderful situation of being able to move people on and accelerate them through that change process. But if you're just focusing on what you see on the bit at the top, the tip of the iceberg, you are going to meet all sorts of resistance, because it's everything underneath that's going to be blocking the change. People either are going to be actively blocking it, or they might appear to be going along the journey, but actually there's going to be all sorts of resistances coming up, which are just preventing the situation from moving forward. Yeah. So I think this is a really powerful image in terms of reminding us that when we see someone, we are literally just seeing the very tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. We've got some great comments in chat coming in. Andy was saying that, he loves the iceberg image. The reason that the ice above the surface is visible is that it's lifted out, up out of the water by the mass of ice below. And that's a really good point, Andy, because when we think about leading change in this context, it is, of course, it is about what's changing. It is about what's above the waterline. That has to be there in order to, as you say, instill readiness and ability. But the world of there's also this element about who we are when change happens, and the world of who we are requires us to show up, and in some cases be vulnerable as leaders. And I was noticing in chat that somebody was saying about just being open about how you're feeling. And I think sharing how you're feeling, displaying empathy with those that are experiencing that anger and fear can really help to create that healthy dialogue. I was having a coaching session today with somebody, and we're talking exactly about this, that he had fast forwarded through the acceptance, I guess, of change, and hadn't appreciated that despite having communicated all that was going on to his team yesterday, that the whole of his team wasn't where he was. And he would say, well, I've just told you all that, so why are you still back here? So I think just meeting people where they are can really help people feel heard. And when we're heard, when we feel that we have an opinion, we're more able to get that will back, as you was talking about, Andy, because I think if we ignore people on the front line, it's at our peril. They have so much wisdom about how the change is going to impact the business. So sometimes people just need to be heard. They know intellectually they need to change. So yeah, let's move on.
I like from Ellen about yes. You have to be vulnerable, and I always talk to leaders about that vulnerability and that being authentic, and actually saying you don't know something, and actually helping, admitting when you're kind of you're uncertain yourself, but you're going to, we're going to do this together, and actually this thing that feels dangerous could be a really, really positive opportunity. You're kind of navigating these treacherous waters together, which I think is really powerful.
It's so tempting to keep selling it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than going, yeah, it's scary and I haven't got all the answers.
Yes,
so that's
nice. And then when we, oh, I've gone through it, gone too far. When we look at this image, I'd invite you to think, what does this make you think of? What, when you look at this, goes through your mind? What are you curious about? And do put in the chat box if you want to. And I think this is a really powerful image for me, because, you know, it's having the confidence to be curious, but then to know what to do with that. And so often we might see something that doesn't look quite right, doesn't feel quite right, but we don't necessarily have the conversation to check out what's going on. We kind of assume, we come back to assumptions, we assume that people are in a certain place and they're actually not. And I think it's being able to step back and check in with people regularly and check, where are they at right now? How are they feeling in terms of what's going on for them, what's getting in the way, what's working well, what's feeling, what are they feeling angry about or anxious about, and being able to reassure them. And then it's about, once you start doing that, you can then start changing their mindset from one of fear to one of positive thinking and opportunity and feeling a bit more confident. The mindset is one of the biggest resistors to change, but it's also one of the great accelerators if we get that right.
So I would, at this point, like to thank Judy, and we'll pay you later, Judy, for a wonderful comment in chat, which brings us nicely on to the next session, which is about how you meet people where they are, when everybody is all having a very different change experience. And I think building confidence in our ability in having those conversations to meet people in different places is key. And I think a good change model, and there are change models available, this isn't the only one, but I've chosen this one because it provides really good strategies to help me move people through it. So this is the change cycle. It's 6 predictable and sequential stages of change that we all go through. And we're going to highlight each one very quickly now, but we will be taking a deeper dive in our workshop on the 1st of October. So you'll have more information then, and also a little bit more in the handout. So we have 6 stages in total: loss, doubt, discomfort, discovery, understanding, and integration. And Lisa's going to take us through the first 3.
Yeah, so when we think about loss, and I think people often forget that actually when you start to change, move forward, that you're leaving something behind. So there is going to be a sense of loss, and with that comes fear, because it's the unknown. And when we think about how to help support people through that stage, it's about creating psychological safety in your workplace. So it's about creating a culture where people can communicate honestly and openly. It's safe to be honest in terms of what's going on for you, how you're feeling, what's worrying you, and so on. So having these clear channels of communication is so important to ensure that people feel that they can be authentic and vulnerable, as we've already discussed. With doubt, there can be that sense of resentment, and I think when we talked a little bit about, if you're not sure about something, how that can make you feel in terms of that resentment, that anger. And I think about giving information is something that can really reassure, even if you're saying you don't know something, just being honest about that and saying, actually, we're at a stage where we're not quite sure what's happening with this, but this is what we're working on, this is how we're trying to find out, this is what we're doing to try and get more information, rather than giving no information at all. If you don't fill the information gap, people will use their own imaginations to fill it, and it's usually the worst side of what they could come up with. And the final part that I'm going to talk about, for handing back to Amanda, is discomfort. And these 3 stages are all very inward. They're all about what's going on inside us. And this is to do with anxiety. And a lot of people, we talk about mental health needs in the workplace. Anxiety is really increased at the moment for a lot of the workforce. And that's about helping people be able to move on in really small steps. So thinking where they're at now individually, not where you're wanting the whole organisation to be going, but every individual, where they're at, what small step they can take forward that they feel comfortable with and confident with, so that they feel motivated to carry on engaging with that change process.
Excellent.
And then Amanda, handing over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So this is where the magic happens between discomfort and discovery. One of the key behaviours or feelings in discomfort is confusion, that Lisa was referring to, which causes that anxiety. So the world you knew is getting smaller, the world you don't know is getting bigger. and our brain kicks in because it tries to solve problems. So when you as leaders see people who are confused, you know they're at stage 3, you know they're at the discomfort, and you've got this opportunity to help them get over to the discovery stage. So with discovery, there's a feeling of anticipation, a sense that we're all in it together. We've come from outside focusing on ourselves to now focusing on what our teammates are doing and what our value is and what we can contribute. And it's about really the willingness to create and explore different perspectives. So when you start to see people engaging and saying, how can I help? Where's my value? What could I do here? This is my idea. You know you're at stage 4. Then we move on to understanding. So this is the confidence now, because we're starting to see quick wins, we're starting to see some progress, and we're connecting the dots together. So that celebration is so important, and that acknowledgement of how far you've come, and the personal journey and the work journey that people have been through really helps to create that positive culture of being ready, willing, and able. And then finally, the integration. You've made it. You know, this is a sense of calm, a reflective mood that's about what's been achieved. And by consciously working through these 6 stages, you have a strength now and a resilience to an agility and preparedness for the next change. And I think using a model like this can really help you be where people are. And connect with them and prompt those conversations about the emotions and the behaviours.
Thank you. Sorry, Amanda, my finger was too slow moving forward. So I was just reading some really good comments in the chat box.
Yes.
I can't multitask, pressing the button and reading.
We're going to share these, aren't we, with the email follow-up as well? Yeah. I want to make sure that I capture them.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, that leads us nicely on to talking about the 1st of October, where we're going to be providing a workshop. We'd love you to come and join us on, where we're going to be spending a bit more time really unpicking this and how to move people from one stage to the next. Because I think as one of the comments I was just busy reading was saying, actually, no, sometimes people get stuck and they're not moving forward, and actually and sometimes people don't want to move forward, and actually that's a different issue. But if we're confident about recognizing where people are at and how to move them forward, and we're confident that we're doing the best we can do, then you know, that's the only thing we can do in terms of good leadership. So we'd love you to come and join us on the 1st of October, where we'll be going through it in more detail. We'll send you the deck that we've used today, so you can just click on the link, take you through to Eventbrite. We'll send you the lovely free giveaway, which is going to summarise as well what we've been talking about today. And if you've got any other questions, then do put them in the chat box. Do let us know your thoughts about today's session, and thank you ever so much for joining us.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for all your feedback. It's been a real pleasure to have you join us.
Half an hour's not very long.
And chats keep coming.
3 minutes over.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, and stay in touch.
Yeah.